Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So I've got the 74 CT70 on the lift, and there's two things that I want to work on while I have it up here. One is I've been having some clutch issues where the starting is getting more and more difficult, and I'm getting a slip when I kick it even nice and slow. I've made the adjustments to the external nut here to the point that it actually makes the shifts a little jerky, but I'm still getting that slippage. I think part of it has to do with the fact that the larger cylinder and piston that we put in just makes it that much more difficult, and I assume there's a good chance that the clutch plates have never been changed in this anyway. So I'm going to pull the clutch pack off and put in new discs. That should be pretty straightforward. While I have the engine cover off though, I'm also going to install a high flow oil pump. Now this is something that I should have done and you should do during the big bore installation because I'm going to have to take the head off again. The oil pump is here on the engine side, but you need to make a 2mm hole to drill that out a little bit bigger, and that has to come here from where the head of the engine connects to the lower half of the engine. So I need to figure out exactly how I'm going to pull that off too, because I may have to remove one of the engine studs to get my drill in there, or I'm going to try to see if I can't get an extension so that I don't have to do that because I've never removed an engine stud before. But I'm going to pull the engine head off, get that hole drilled, and get that oil pump installed. So those are the two things I'm going to do. First I'll drain the oil, pull the cover off, and then we'll go from there. I thought it'd clear, but it looks like I have to take off the kickstand too to get the side cover off. Alright, so I've got the engine exposed now. This is the clutch pack that I'm going to remove to replace some discs. First I'm going to pull off these 4, or rather 3 screws. I've actually seen some that have 4 screws. I'm not sure which ones have which, but these 3 screws pulled off so that I can access the nut to back this off entirely. And then the oil pump's right here behind it. The hole we're going to be drilling is right alongside here. Again, I'll have to remove the head before I get there, but I'm going to let this drain for a couple more seconds. Then I'll move this paper around a bit. But first let me get these screws out. Alright, so with that plate off, and you see that I'll have to clean up this gasket. One of these little metal tabs are inside the notch on this lock nut. So you just need to pry that up so that it can spin freely. And then I have this tool, I'll put a link to the description below, but I got this from T-Bolt USA. That fits in there, and then you can back that nut off. Oil is slippery. Alright, so clutch pack is off. I'm going to pull out this retaining ring and the stack, replace it with the new discs. I've got the new plates here. I've heard that you're supposed to soak them in oil for a while, so I actually need to run an errand. I'm going to leave them in some of this oil for a little bit. And taking a look at the existing plates, they're actually pretty worn out. The notches are almost gone altogether. It's almost smooth on this surface, so it looks like this probably was my problem. And it's a really cheap fix. These plates are only about $10. It's just the process of having to take everything apart that makes this a more difficult job. Okay, so the new plates have been soaking for a moment. I'm going to go ahead and pop them back in. All right, so that should be good to go. I'm going to set this aside and get to work on the oil pump. I covered the steps on how to remove the head in the previous video that I'll link right here. So I'll just kind of fast forward as I pull off these nuts here on the front cover, take off the timing chain, the 2 other bolts here, and back it all off. Okay, so the kit came with a different oil drive shaft. It actually has a, I guess, male side on the end that the oil pump connects to, whereas the stock one has a female side. It looks like I can slot in and use a screwdriver to back it out. Based on this one, it's just looks like an M6 type bolt that's down on that side. But when I spin it, it's moving the timing chain. So the timing chain obviously is what's connected to spin the mechanism to move the oil pump gear. My problem is that since I already took off the head, the timing chain is loose. So I probably should have taken all this out before I got to here. Although now that I think about it, I didn't, when I was replacing the timing chain and timing chain gears, I didn't replace the gear for the oil pump because I couldn't back it out. Now that I have it out, I may as well just take off the other side of the engine and change that at the same time. All right, so I'm here on the other side of the engine. I pulled off the flywheel and this little stator plate. So this is the gear that actually I didn't replace when I did the rest of the gear replacement just because I couldn't access it. If you look at it, the teeth are somewhat worn, so while I'm sure it would have been fine if I left it, I do have the new gear, and since I'm pulling off that axle, I might as well put the new gear in at the same time. So the challenge is to hold this gear so that I can spin it off from the other side. I'm imagining I can just wedge a screwdriver in there again. I'm not too worried about the teeth now that I'm about to replace it. So I'm going to use a screwdriver on one end and another screwdriver to wedge it here, and hopefully that'll be enough to be able to back that out, put the new shaft in, and then start the assembly process. Okay, old shaft out, and here is the new thinner shaft. I believe it's thinner if you're running a stroker setup to have clearance or something, but anyway, it's what I need for the setup that I've got going on right here. So I'm also, again, at the same time going to get the new gear in. You can see that the teeth on the old one were pretty gnarled up. They're kind of in a wave shape, whereas the new one's looking nice and sharp. So I'm going to pop this in. All right, that started, so I'll get back on the other side and thread that all the way in. I'm not sure what you're supposed to use to drive that all the way in. I've got this little forked bit that I'm going to use that I think will be good enough. So I think the shaft is now good to go. I wasn't talking when I did it, but there was also a little collet that I popped in there that came with the kit. I'm going to put everything back together on the flywheel side of the engine. And then the last thing to do is drilling out this hole. So this is the hole that we need to drill out. Right now it's probably only 1 millimeter in diameter and it needs to go to 2 millimeters. It's also super important that when we drill this, we don't drill too far. So I've got this very fine metal rod that if I push through here, I see ends right inside this little channel of the engine casing. So it's only about 1 inch that we're drilling in. But make sure that as you're doing this, that you're not going past this little chamber here, because that's the area that needs to be widened out. Now to figure out how I get my drill in here, because obviously the drill itself has a mechanism, so it's not going to be able to butt up against this rod. I may be able to just back out this rod. Again, I'm just really scared that if I break it inside the casing, that's going to be trouble. Let me try a drill extension first and see how successful I might be with that. All right, so I think I'm going to try to remove the stud before I do something stupid with the extension, because I couldn't get the right angle, and I'd have to take off the wheel or maybe even the fork, and it seems like a lot of work. So I'm going to see if I can't just use 2 nuts, jam them together to back this off. If I run into too much trouble, I'll go back to the extension. Oh, look at that. All right, that was less painful than I thought it was. So, and I don't know, yours may not be in as good a condition as mine, but that seems like a much better solution than that extension that I was about to try. And since I can use a regular drill bit instead of that hex one that isn't nearly as good, T-Bolt USA did send me a high-speed 2mm drill bit that they sell. So you can pick this up at the same time that you pick up the rest of the oil pump and the other things you're doing. I'll put a link to this in the description as well. All right, that's it. I'm gonna get some compressed air and blow it this way to try to shoot all of those little particles out away from the engine. All right, so I think that's good to go. I think everything now is just a matter of putting things back in their place. The oil pump came with a new gasket, and this now female side mates with the male shaft that we put on. I'm going to get the engine stud back in. I still have the nuts jammed against each other, so I'll similarly just thread it back in the way that it was. So unlike some of these videos where I'm showing something that I've done a bunch of times, this is the first time that I've done this, so kind of a learning experience. Sorry if it's a little bit choppy as I figured it all out. But let me get the engine reassembled and we'll wrap this one up. Okay, so while that took a bit of time, it was actually a pretty straightforward procedure. I have the stock carburetor on the engine at the moment. I've actually been going back and forth between this one and the 20mm carburetor. I've got them both tuned and running pretty well, so just trying to figure out which one I'm going to leave on the bike. The original one obviously has a little bit more of that classic look, but the 20mm one I imagine I'm going to be able to get a little more performance out of in the long run. So if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. T-Bolt USA also has a really good tech database, and I'll link to that in the description below as well, that has step-by-steps on how to do the oil pump and a lot of other articles on maintenance and installation of high-performance parts. Again, thanks T-Bolt for supporting this build. Thanks all of you for watching. Stay tuned for more videos and keep on building.